Rye Bunny is what I'm calling a counter service hospitality-driven restaurant. You order all of your food at the counter, but once you sit down, this is where it's kind of a hybrid of two different styles in a full-service restaurant. Someone's gonna take care of you.
Focused on some comfort foods and like things that, for me personally, kind of evoke some sort of nostalgia. Trying to like let the individual ingredients shine a little bit more and be a little less fussy with presentations and finishing flourishes. Rye Bunny exists in Adams Morgan in DC, where our previous restaurant, Tail Up Goat, also existed in the same space. At Tail Up Goat, we had a Michelin-starred.
Truthfully, it was kind of one of the more nerve-wracking things, right? Closing down this critically successful darling, this restaurant that has like built an incredible community. To know that you have something well on so many levels, to like blow that all up and hit a reset button was both a really exciting thing to do and a little bit of a scary thing to do, but let's try something different and have some fun with it. It's 5:30 and we are now open. We opened our doors, we're in week 3, so we're still pretty new, and we wanted to open something that was a neighborhood restaurant again. We started construction here January 5th. We were finished with construction about March 1st, and then we started our first week of soft openings. So we got some practice reps in before we had our like full unveiling on April 2nd.
This is Colin. Colin's our sous chef. Colin was with us at Tail Up Goat as our AM sous and is here at Rye Bunny as our PM sous and does all of our pork butchering for us. With this dish, I really just wanted to highlight the few ingredients that we're working with. The pork from autumn olive, the soy and the shiokoji from Keepwell, and like that's it. The pork is so good, I just really wanted to highlight it on its own and like let it kind of stand on its own as much as possible. And those other couple ingredients really just like work to embellish the flavors of the pork. Our brine here, it's sugar, water, soy, a little bit of thyme and some garlic. That's literally it. So they'll sit in here for 4 hours, kind of soak up that goodness. This just helps impart a little bit of more flavor. It helps on the caramelization later that you're getting a little bit of sugar in the process and just keeps them more tender and moist and juicy throughout the cooking. So from here, the chops will sit in this marinade. They'll go in the fridge to do that. For service, we'll pull them out, let them temper a little bit so that they come up to temp just as coach, and then just throw them on the grill. We get all of our pork from Autumn Olive Farm. They're in Waynesboro, Virginia. I wanted to continue to work with a lot of purveyors we worked with in the past, and Autumn Olive was definitely high on that list. The chop is just like a very straightforward dish. It focuses on their pork and then 2 other ingredients, both of which come from Keepwell, which is a company that makes vinegars and other ferments and kind of preserves in the area. It puts those 3 ingredients together on a plate in a way that's like pretty straightforward and simple.
It's the dish I think people are most surprised by. I think it's the dish that we get like, wow, I've never had a pork chop like that. To keep Tail Up Goat open and make it sustainable, we would have had to raise prices by about 25 to 30% in 2026.
We never really wanted to run a restaurant that was like that, maybe like once a year treat kind of like price tag. It just wasn't for us.
By changing how that first order is taken, we can run with a slightly smaller team here, which means we can pay really competitively, we can offer benefits that were non-negotiable for us as owner-operators. That was kind of why we were rethinking what we did next and why we opened Rye Bunny specifically under this new model.
This is my very good friend Benji. We've been working together for like 10 years. What he's working on right now is finishing this filling for our ravioli. We have a bevy of wild greens here. So we have some ramp greens, which are very, very seasonal and only gonna be around for another like week in this area. We have some stinging nettles, which do exactly that. So until they're cooked, you don't wanna touch them. We have some dandelion greens, spinach, and some Swiss chard. All things we get from a whole host of different farms we work with. So he's gonna chop these pretty fine just by hand and then fold these into some sheep's milk ricotta, a little bit of egg, some parm, and some lemon zest. And that is the filling for our ravioli. A lot of people expect ravioli fillings to be like super fine and like a smooth puree. This has a little bit of texture to it. You can kind of taste the greens. I love stuffed pastas, raviolis, like pretty much anything like that. The idea is that we'll always have one on the menu. I am somewhat notorious amongst my cooks for not R&Ding a ton because we really do work very seasonally. This is the final filling, so this is gonna get just placed in some pastry bags for Beatrice to later pipe them out into little dollops on her pasta, and that's it. This is our pasta maker, Beatrice. We have worked together for around 11 years. I said 10. She reminded me it's 11, feels more like 50 most of the time. So she's putting together our ravioli dough. So she's gonna be weighing out a couple different flours. So this is our Caputo flour, very fine, very soft flour. Durum flour, a little bit of a coarser wheat. Shazzy has our egg yolks ready to go here. All those come from the good folks at Earth and Eats in Lancaster area, Pennsylvania. So this is the dough for our ravioli that's on the menu. The wild green ravioli. We'll sell probably 30-ish orders of these tonight. But tomorrow is Friday. We're gonna sell like 40 to 50-ish. There's like 5-6 orders on the board right now. It would take me almost an hour to get to this point, personally, and she knocked that out in about 15 minutes.
I'm very happy for John and Joe. I can say a lot about John. He's a great person.
Beatrice is also a lovely human being. She really like took ownership over our pasta program then, and she doesn't like come in to like do a decent job. She really comes in and tries to make everything better than it was the day before. When we were conceiving the style of food we wanted to do and like hit on those like kind of comfort, nostalgia food notes, I think pasta is like at the top of that list for me personally. Like my favorite thing in the world to eat, my favorite thing to cook too. I always knew I wanted to do that and have a pasta program. Gonna cook our pasta here. So we basically just brown butter and then pour it over shaved green garlic and let it bubble away and infuse that way. Fava beans. And that is the basis of our pasta sauce here. It's a really simple pickup after all of the work of getting the pasta made. Sauce looks good. Fiore Sardo, sheep's milk cheese from Northern Italy. It's like very unctuous and brings like a lot of that smoky flavor. And this is the final dish. It's definitely, if not our like #1 selling dish, very, very high up there. This was something that kind of came together as we were opening. It was, I think I probably wrote down wild greens somewhere on a piece of paper. What I think is great about it is like give you like a snapshot in time of where we are in the season.
One of the things that was really important to us in the design process as we thought about this new model was kind of separating if we had a line from what was going on in the dining room. This first moment is kind of like walking through the home. One of the things we did with the stained glass, at Capitol Hill Stained Glass made these incredible custom panels. They kind of mimic some of the designs in the quilts, which is an old pattern from the 1860s that quilt makers used. And it's kind of like the idea of a transom at a front door when you enter someone's home. So you're kind of like entering our home here. When we were reimagining the space, we worked with the same architects that designed Tail Up Goat. One of the things they really pulled from is John saying he was really gonna lean into the idea of what comfort looked like on a plate. It was important to us that it felt different from Tail Up Goat, that it felt like a space that you'd really wanna relax and be cozy in.
When you're talking about comfort foods, like fried chicken's pretty high up there for I think anybody. This was a dish that like, I kind of had the idea of some flavors that I wanted to get on the dish. So he's gonna hit it with a little bit of honey, and there's gonna be a spice situation, and then that is black garlic toum. I think the fried chicken is probably the thing that's on most tables than anything except for maybe the anchovy toast. One of the first things we do when we get in is mixed breads. One of them on our menu currently is our milk bread. This is part of our anchovy toast.
So what we have in there so far is milk, eggs, toasted milk powder, sugar, yeast, high gluten, tangzong. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly.
Tangzong is it's like a pre-ferment. You essentially take flour and water and you cook it. Stretches the gluten a little bit and it allows for the bread to like obtain more elasticity. And it is kind of like a defining characteristic of milk bread. The milk bread itself was a creation of a former sous chef named Aiden, who I miss terribly. She did a bunch of different baking projects for us, and one of them was the milk bread. I've always done a lot of breads. I like a ton of sourdough, and this was one of them that I was just like really excited to keep on the menu and keep around in some capacity or another. I just love milk bread. It's a really versatile thing. And I think when done really well, it shows like a level of technique that like I'm proud of. So this is the milk bread we mixed yesterday. It sat in the walk-in proofing overnight. Colin is going to roll it out, shape it, and put it in our fun little pans over here to our left. This dish, when it was kind of conceived and thought of, it was definitely one of the ones that I was like most interested in getting feedback from our soft opening week. I was curious how it was going to be received. Anchovies are like kind of a polarizing thing, like a small couple of bite dish meant to be one of our opening snacks. It has been received really well.
We're gonna be proofing for the next 2.5 hours, and then we'll go into a 350-degree oven. They take about usually 50 minutes to an hour to bake off.
The anchovy toasts, I would say, are almost on every single table. That's proving to be a dish that everyone wants to try.
We cut it into little like rectangles, little soldiers. And those are gonna get seared on our plancha. We're gonna top that with a little bit of red onion and blood orange jam. Red onions get sauteed with a sherry vinegar. We make a jam with blood oranges, just blood orange, sugar, and a little bit of lemon. Mix the two guys together. When I initially started planning the menu, we're in the middle of winter, so like that winter citrus is still great. And then a Cantabrian anchovy is gonna like lay right over that fancy Spanish anchovy, very, very delicious. And then a little bit of fennel pollen to finish. And that is our anchovy toast.
Hi, how are you? Welcome, welcome. I'm so used to running a restaurant with reservations that I was like every day you open the doors and what's gonna happen. And it's been really cool that people have been as excited about what's happening as we are.
So I stand right over there and I stare at everybody walking in the door all night long, and it's like fun to see people having a good time. You know, kind of enjoying the conviviality of standing in a line.
People are continuing to look for ways to build community, and I think restaurants are a really important part of that.
The model that we ran with Tail Up Goat was just simply not sustainable any longer for a million different reasons, most of them financial and the economic climate that changed drastically after pandemic. I don't know that like this specific model has to be like the future, but there are gonna have to be some changes to the model for restaurants to continue to provide the level of dining that they have provided in the past.